Hi, this is the second video in the series showing how to take a 3-view drawing of a boat hull and turn it into a 3D model of a boat hull suitable for machining. If you didn't follow the first video, you would be well advised to go back and look at it because I'm going to kind of start off in the middle. As I said at the end of the last video, I'd had a lot of trouble figuring out how to model this, and the principal reason for that is this junction right here. I was using the cross-section function to actually model all of these various surfaces, and I just could never figure out how to get it to work right. I tried and tried changing the geometry, doing a little of this, a little of that, and finally just let it go for a very long time. It's been several months, I think, since I've come back to it. And last night I was just sitting here thinking, and there might be another tool I could use besides cross section that would make this a little easier. And I tried it, and sure enough, it worked. I did have to do a few little things to accommodate the tool that I was using, and so I'm kind of starting back a little bit short. I'll do this very quickly, but you may recall that I had basically a little extra line segments going in here, just like I've got here. And those turned out to not be necessary. In fact, they were kind of detrimental to what I was doing. So I've already trimmed those. I want to go ahead and just zoom in here and use the quick trim tool to get rid of those here, here, and here. This leaves me with clean junctions at every point. And we'll go ahead and very quickly bring up the surfaces and project this down into a 3-view. So we'll go to Other, Project Curves to Surface. I'll pick the top surface, the gunnel of the boat, and the transom back here. Hit the space bar, click OK, pick the surface to transfer it to, and you see it's transferred. And I'll quickly do that for the others. In these cases, just basically 2 lines there. Transfer it. Then those. Transfer them. And lastly, the keel line. There. Now turning off the surfaces and turning off my top curves, once again I have my 3D model, or my 3D wireframe I should say. And going back to that spot that I said was giving me trouble. The reason this was giving me fits before is that using the cross-section tool, it would attempt to start with this broad flat board almost parallel to the XY axis, and it would warp it as it came forward, and then as it came down to a point, it would mathematically generate all kinds of complexity in this surface it was generating, to the degree that at the point there it was so hard to handle that I simply could not get it to generate cleanly and then attach to the rest of the boat. And this caused me just all kinds of fits. Well, first thing we're going to do here in setting up for a different method is we're going to attach this keel line to this point. And we'll use the translate function to do that. Go to Sketch, Enter. I'm going to pick my starting point. I'm going to pick my end point. So the geometry I'm going to get is the keel line. Select it and confirm that with OK or the space bar. I'm going to hold the Shift key to get an end point. That's going to be my move from point. And then I'm going to do the same, holding the Shift key to get the end point here, which is also the intersection with this other line. That's going to be my move to point. Alright, so now I have those all going to the same point, all nice and jolly. A couple of other things I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw a line from here to my next section, from there to the next section up. I'll use the line join feature or function. Again, I'm holding shift to get a snap point to anchor it to, and it'll automatically go to a snap point once you're near it. So click that, and once again I'll use that endpoint, holding shift to get the snap. And here you may be difficult to see, so I'll go in a little bit. There's a line segment there, and it wants to try to go to that. Actually, that's just, as I pull back a little bit, that's just the view I was, the angle of my view. It looked like this point was, I'll go ahead and make it, it looked like this point was back there just from the angle that I was viewing it at, but in fact it was going to the right place. Okay, so now I've got the prow of the boat outlined, and we'll go around to the stern, and we'll basically do the exact same thing. I'm just going to use line join, holding shift to get a snap point to start with, and move over here. Hold shift once again, move up to there, hold shift once again, move up to there. Rotate that a little bit and do the same thing on the other side. You can probably hear my cat just spazzing out in the background. I apologize for that, but not much I can do besides shut the door, and then it'll just holler at the other side of the door. So keep going. There. Now we've got all our outlines. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I've already got this, just get rid of all of this. Go to select and delete that, because that's the layer that I want to generate these to. And as the layer says, patches, that's the tool that I'm going to be using for this. What I'm going to be using is multi-sided patches, and in the case of the bottom two panels I'm going to use 3-edge. A 3-edge patch, if you look down here in the lower left hand side, left click the first entity of the chain, shift left click the end of the chain, continue selecting chains. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start back here. I'm going to select this entity, then I'm going to select this entity, and I'm going to select this entity. These have to be selected one at a time. So I've got a start point by clicking it. I'll end it with a shift click. You can also just shift click at the end here. So on this one I'll just hold down shift. But you see I get all kinds of other stuff because all of these are basically joined together. So I have to be particular. I'll cancel out of that and start again, and actually click and shift click each individual piece of the chain. So I click, shift click, and direction is important here. I'm starting here, moving down to here, then coming back to here. Click and shift click, again going that way, click and shift click. Once I've got them all there, I confirm it by hitting the space bar, clicking OK, and a patch is born. Now this has the advantage of being mathematically different from the surface that was generated by a cross section, and it turns out to be much less complicated as far as joining other surfaces when you get up to this crazy little point. I'm going to turn the layer off but still keep it active, just so that I can actually I better remember which one I've done. There we go. I'm going to generate my patches onto a layer that I'm not seeing at the moment, and the reason for that is that they get in the way of selecting things. So I'm just going to continue going and making my patches as I go. So click, shift click, click, shift click, click and shift click. Confirm it, and when I'll go look, you see that I've now got 2. Now I'm using the surface 3 edges on these bottom 2 because there are only 3 edges, but now I get up into 4 edges. Well, I'm going to continue using patches, but I'm going to use a 4-edge patch this time. And for the rest of these, this is the surfaces from the gunwale down to the first chine, then down toward the bottom of the boat, and this one here. So 4 different surfaces I'm going to generate here. Turn that back off for the sake of appearance. And the process is exactly the same. So click and shift click, click and shift click, rotate this so that I can see it, click and shift click, click and shift click. Okay. And now I'll take the next one down, click and shift click, click and shift, click and shift click, click and shift click. Confirm that one. Now I'll go over to the other side. Click and shift, click and shift, and so on and so on. Confirm that one, and here's the last one. And again, this is a lot of button pressing, but because the every line in this thing is basically joined to every other line, if you just tell the software nilly-willy to start a chain here and end it here, it can take any route to select that chain that it desires, and it always desires the wrong route. Okay, so taking a quick look at what I've got here, I now have pretty much the entire boat hull except for the transom, the rear of the boat, stern if it were a ship, or well, I guess it's a stern of a boat too, but go ahead and turn that off. Now I have to use something a little different here. You actually can use a multi-sided patch to do this, but in this case a skin is the way to go. On a skin you have a cross section, another cross section, a rail, and a rail. And the order that you pick these in is very important, and the direction that you pick them in is very important. Looking up here at the diagram, you'll see arrows attached to every single one of these. On both the cross sections, they need to be going, or they need to be oriented in the same direction. So number 1 goes in the direction that's indicated. Number 2 also goes in the direction that's indicated. Number 3, and by the way, there can be multiple cross sections in here. You can have 20 cross sections. The last 2 chains that you select are going to be your rails. You're only allowed 2 rails. You can have any number of cross sections, but they will follow 2 and only 2 rails. And the 2 rails are the last ones. The 2 rails go from the first cross section that you select, starting at the origin with the next to last chain, in this case rail 3, and go into the origin of the last cross section. And again, the last rail goes from the end of the first cross section to the end of the last cross section, and obviously touching on every cross section in between. In this case, we're going to pick the rotate this so that you can see that it's curved. This outward and upward curved upper part of the stern, the transom, where you would attach an outboard motor, is a curve. And we're going to transition down to these 2 entities, these 2 line segments together are going to be my last cross section. So it's going to be curved at the top, more or less flat at the bottom, and the sides being my rails. So we'll get started on this. You simply click and then shift click to end, and you get arrows to show your direction, so you need to follow that convention. Starts up here and goes over there, so I'm going to start the same side on this one. I click there and shift click there. That's got my 2 cross sections defined. Now I go back to the beginning side of these, and that's my first rail. I'll click and shift click, and there's my, before I get any farther, let's get this back down into the right layer. Again, I click and shift click. That's got everything lined up correctly, so I'll confirm it. And now when I go and enable the view on the patches, back this off a little so you can see it a little better. You see that the boat now has a stern. It's fairly complex. It's got a lot of smaller surfaces in it, but it selects as a single piece, and more importantly, all of these are joined up on the proper lines. To make this into a solid, you simply go to Utilities, go to Stitching, and stitch surfaces to solid. And you can window select the entire thing, tell it OK, cancel out of that, and now when I go into selection mode, the entire thing selects. I'm going to go ahead and turn off these curves because they're no longer needed. It all selects, and go ahead and get a view of the part that was just driving me bananas for so long. This little part right here that was just, it would not fit. It would not, no matter what I tried using the different method for generating the surfaces, I could not get that to really line up correctly. Using the patches, it lined up beautifully, and had no trouble with it. It's quite quick. One other thing I can do, actually, let me turn off the view on those patches. I can use a 3-sided patch, I believe, to create an upper deck for this thing. You really wouldn't, probably wouldn't want that, but I'm going to go ahead and create it. Look at patches again, and there. Now instead of an open boat, we have an actual solid that you could machine this out of a block of wood fairly easily, and you'd have a regular little boat. And again, go into stitching, stitch surfaces to solid. I want to select all of it, click OK, and now in selection mode it all selects at once. This is the quick and easy way to generate the surfaces from the geometry that we spent the last video talking about. As you saw when I made some minor changes to, let me turn this back off and I'll go to top curves again. I had originally basically left a little tail on these because the way I was generating the surface, I wanted to have the surfaces go beyond one another. In other words, to intersect, and then I was able to trim them at the point of intersection. This worked fairly well for, say, well, let me bring up my 3D curves and turn that off to have a look at these. I was able to generate the top strakes here, or chines. I'd generate the middles, and those were not really an issue. I could join those together, no problems. It was when I got into that one devilish little twist that, again, as I've mentioned several times, it's the way that it mathematically generated it just gave issues, going from this broad flat piece to this point that when you start looking at it, this board is curved pretty sharply. And it was, it was an acceptable surface. It was just the way it was generated caused issues at that point. And really the point of this whole discussion is there are numerous ways to do everything, it always seems, in any sophisticated CAD package, and Bobcat is pretty sophisticated. If you're beating your head against a wall, back off, have a look at what all tools there are available to you, and see if maybe a different one works a little better, because very often you find that that's the case. And certainly was in this case. You saw how quickly that was generated. I had spent, I don't know how many hours trying to do this with a different method that seemed perfectly viable, and it just kept giving me a problem in that one little joint right there. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why. I got tunnel vision, spent a huge amount of time fiddling with geometry and trying to get it just right and trying to appease this tool that it turns out the tool was the problem. I was essentially, I was using a framing hammer to drive a paneling tack, and I kept dimpling the wood as an analogy. And well, it's not a very good analogy because I use a framing hammer all the time and I don't dimple things anymore because I've been using it for so long. But you get the point. What looks like the right tool for the job may not necessarily be the right tool for the job. So look around. In a package as rich and as full featured as Bobcat, you may very well find that there's another one that might not seem to be the appropriate one, but turns out to be just the ticket. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm sorry for the delay between making the two videos, but there you have it. With these two videos, you're able to go from a 3-view drawing of a fairly complex little object into a 3D model of the same object, suitable for, oh, you could 3D print this. You could save this as an STL file, use a slicer and slice it down, use it for a 3D printer. You could mill it out of anything you wanted to, depending on your machine. You cut it out of wood on a router. You could mill it out of aluminum on a mill, or plastic or whatever. But mainly we're just concentrated on the CAD side here, and that's how you do that. Thanks very much. Have a nice day.